All right, we are here at a legendary location, the Oceana O Club. A lot of history here,
Yes.
Skipper. So we're here with Captain Steve Djunaedi, who is a Tomcat Rio that became a Hornet Wizzo. So we want to explore some of those differences. So tell us basically the trajectory of your fighter squadron tours.
Okay, so I started here in 1999. First moved here after getting winged in Pensacola, right to VF 101 Grim Reapers. Trained as a Rio, finished up in early 2000. Went to VF 211 Checkmates. They were on deployment on the Stennis on their Millennium cruise. Went out there in 2000, did Southern Watch, did all those early stuff, and then came home shortly after.
No-fly zone over Iraq.
No-fly zone over southern Iraq. Came back here, and then did a couple, another year or so, and then when I was in Fallon, Nevada, so I was going through my FAC-A syllabus as a Rio.
Forward Air Controller Airborne.
Forward Air Controller Airborne.
Yes. The Tomcat warmed to that mission, did really well in that mission.
Correct.
That was a great thing.
Right around the Kosovo time.
Yep.
That's where it was kind of born as a FAC-A mission. Was getting trained on that. Did did the academics, and then started the flights. And then we went out to Fallon, Nevada, and it was about 2 weeks ahead of our air wing, when then it was CAG 9. We went out ahead of time to do some FAC-A flights ahead, and that's when 9/11 happened. I grew up in New York City. My senior prom was actually in the West Tower as well, so that it hit me hard. I had high school friends that perished in the World Trade Center and from Brooklyn Tech High School, so it really hit me hard just being from New York City. Obviously, we stopped our flying. It was actually one of the really cool things in my career very early on is, and I don't want to say cool things, but one of those kind of eerie feelings is I remember all going into the NSOC headquarter auditorium, and they all told us at that point, I need everyone here to man alerts with live weapons that they're bringing up from Hawthorne. If anyone has any issues shooting down an airliner, then you can basically be off the watch bill. And so it was one of those feelings of, are we going to do this?
They actually briefed that.
They actually briefed that. We never stood any alerts out of Fallon because I think it was all taken care of by the Fresno and in the Bay Area. But that was one of those big eye-openers. So shortly after that, the rest of the air wing finally made it out to Fallon, CAG 9. We did an accelerated air wing Fallon for about 3 weeks. We went straight out to the Stennis, did basically a JTFX port call in San Diego for the weekend, and we were off to do our deployment early.
So your CAG Ops, Sprout Proano,
yes,
relieved me at the Naval Academy.
Okay.
Right. So I just saw Sprout at Hook. So from there, your tours were what?
So from there, did the OEF, original OEF with VF 211, came back. Then I was selected to go through the Top Gun class to go to Strike Fighter Weapons School Atlantic here at Oceana, and I ended up being the last F-14 Tomcat class in 2003.
Amazing, amazing.
Yeah.
And did you know it at the time that was going to be the last?
Yes, we did know at the time we were going to be the last class. At that time, the AIM 54 was done in the inventory, so we were Sparrow and then Sidewinder only. But for the class, they let us use the Phoenix because we were obviously in a big disadvantage. The Hornet guys had the AMRAAM, and we were able to use the AIM 54.
So it's interesting because we've profiled Snort Snodgrass on the channel. In fact, there's a famous photo of Snort and I at the bar right there, taken by Diane, who was the legendary bartender back in my day.
I remember Diane.
You remember
still.
Diane? You're old enough to remember Diane. When Snort was fighter wing, and we document this in the channel with, Snort on Snort episode, he zeroed out the Phoenix line to fund Lantern,
right.
The ground pod, the precision guided pod, which was a great call. But it's kind of amazing that you got caught in the crosshairs at Top Gun because now, okay, you guys don't have Phoenix,
right.
So it's back to Winders and Sparrows,
Correct.
which, as you said, is a huge disadvantage.
Yep.
So interesting. So now you transition from Tomcats to Super Hornets.
Correct. So while I was at the Strike Fighter Weapons School here at Oceana, I was still doing Tomcats. We were still doing FAC-A training because we still had at that point a couple B squadrons left and the two D squadrons, 31 and 213. So we still had to get them through SFARP, FAC-A, NVG quals. So we got them through that. about halfway through my tour there in 2004 timeframe, they sent us over to Lemoore and we got Super Hornet quals. And so we came back, and at that time, 106 here, the FRS, the RAG, was just getting Super Hornets, and they were instructors only. So they let us as patch wearers now start integrating. So there was times I would fly the F-14 and the Super Hornet the same day. I do even remember one day I flew a FAC event in the morning in a Tomcat, and then flying a Super Hornet flight in the afternoon with 106.
Unbelievable. So,
it was quite.
All right. So we've hinted at the difference between the two airplanes in Rio versus Wizzo, sort of in the abstract, and that's why I wanted to talk to you.
Absolutely.
So your last tour was in what model of the Tomcat? Your last Tomcat tour was in what model?
So I was in the F-14A, was my last fleet squadron.
Okay.
But as a weapons school guy, I was able to fly in the B and the D.
Okay.
So I flew all three.
But let's just lowest common denominator.
Right.
So
AUG 9,
right?
Not even the PTID, the old fishbowl, which we had at times.
Yes. What was the difference between the weapon system capability in the rear cockpit in the Tomcat and the Super Hornet? What struck you between the AUG 9 and what we're using? AISA, which version were you using?
So I ended up using, in the FRS we had APG 73, but I ended up becoming the VFA 213 training officer, which was in the brand new APG 79 AISA, which is just a world difference.
Well, let's just start with the APG, the first gen of the difference. So what struck you in terms of the Wizzo's capabilities, and let's just do in the air-to-air arena, because one of our greatest worries as a Rio was you dive into the notch, dump your radar picture, and then you turn back in.
And pulse.
And so we're working DDD, pulse, and basically you get to the merge, and it's like, sorry, there was only 10 miles. That's not a lot of time. So was it like amazing all of a sudden in the Super Hornet in terms of that sort of thing?
It was. So there was definitely the hot modes, or the ACM modes, was definitely worked better even in the APG 73 and worked really well in the APG 79. The old days of coming out of the notch and trying to just find the pulse surge, we didn't have to do that. There was obviously different modes to get back in there. But the biggest thing, I think the difference between being a Rio and a Wizzo is the Rio obviously had certain things you had to do in the back. We had to take the alignment. We had certain, we had the radio in the back seat. We had to manipulate the fly catchers to get the best power outage of our AUG 9. We had all the circuit breakers.
Yeah.
The Rio earned his or her pay by how you manipulate the radar, how you manipulate the systems. And in a Super Hornet, the front seat has the same systems as the back seat.
So there is redundancy, when in the Tomcat there was not.
There was not redundancy. So they really just added a second seat, and really now the whole goal of being a Wizzo was, how do I do tactical crew coordination, and how do I optimize the mission set, whether it's air-to-air or air-to-surface, with two folks that can really have all the same controls and manipulation. So there was a lot of work as far as, is it beyond visual BVR using the radar, but once you come out of the notch, or once you're in the WVR, the within visual range, that becomes the pilot now running the radar. So even though both can fight over the same systems, it became a crew coordination piece of who had it, who had the comm calls, who had the radar at the time, and so forth. So it definitely became a lot more finesse, where in the Tomcat, your crew coordination was almost purely by the systems were broken up.
Right, okay. So we had some folks, hosers working the camera here, we had some folks ask us today at our booth, if you will, our station on the flight line, what's the difference between the E and the F in terms of mission areas? So you've just framed it perfectly in terms of, hey, a lot of redundancy. Pilot can bring up the same thing I can bring up. This is very unlike the Tomcat. So what would you say is the difference between an E mission, one-seat Super Hornet, and an F mission, two-seat Super Hornet?
So truly over the years, the E and F have always had the same mission. So all the same strike fighter weapons tactics, Swifty syllabus, all the advanced readiness programs, the workup cycle, the E and Fs all had the same. They had to execute the same air-to-air, the same air-to-surface, using the same weapons, missions. But truly the biggest difference was the FAT-G mission. The FAT-G mission truly stayed with the two-seat cockpit. So the E model never took on the FAT-G mission. That stayed with the two-seat crew, purely because of how much the workload that you have to coordinate with the folks on the ground, the JTACs or the FAC on the ground, and doing that mission. That stayed purely with the F model. But all the other missions, whether it's even the tanking mission, all the way to all the air-to-air or the air-to-surface, and now we're into network-enabled weapons, GPS-guided weapons, all that, both in E and F Squadron all have to master the same amount of stuff. I'd say personally, in an F Squadron, those, especially with GWAT over Afghanistan and Iraq and Syria, those hard missions where we're tracking vehicles, we're tracking folks on the ground using really the AT FLIR pod is what we end up with. You can talk to a lot of folks, and that is truly optimized for a two-seat cockpit, dedicated pilot flying, deconflicting with other aircraft, flying form, potentially with their lead, and then you have the WIZO working the sensors, specifically keeping their eyes, tracking the friendlies, tracking the threats, tracking the enemy, and that really is optimized for that. But the E models had to do the same mission as well.
So which squadron were you the CO of?
So I was the CO of VFA 154, the Black Knights, from out of Lemoore.
Okay. Never been to Lemoore. What was that like? Was that your first Lemoore tour?
That was my first and only Lemoore tour. Very interesting. Obviously, a lot of folks here from Virginia Beach kind of go kicking and screaming out to Lemoore. But I'll tell you what, I mean, it is out in the middle of Central Valley, but the tightness and the camaraderie and the culture of the squadrons out there is pretty phenomenal. Just being out there, they were very tight. There was always squadron functions, and the 154, probably the best squadron in Lemoore and the flight line. It was definitely a privilege to be part of that squadron.
So now you're the commanding officer of the Naval Air Station Oceana, our host here for the air show this weekend. Thank you for that.
Yes, thank you.
Are you living in the Bell House?
No, so actually I did live in the Bell House for about just under a year. I've lived in Virginia Beach for so many years. We kind of wanted to go back into our community. We missed our neighbors. So now our XO, Noodle Apposado, who's a career Lemoore guy, he's out here. He gets the Bell House, and he's loving it.
Yeah, the Bell House is traditionally the CO's residence. I spent several nights when Skip Zobel was the CO.
He's still around. We see him all the time.
I just played golf with Skip a few weeks ago. He was one of my original RAG instructors. Been a great mentor of mine. Another Tomcat Rio, great fellow, and he finished up as the CO. So the Burr and Skip saddle as CO was noise complaints. Are you getting a lot of those? Is this still an issue with?
It's still an issue with noise complaints, but I'll tell you, I mean, I remember when I first got here in '99, there was groups like Cajun, Citizens Against Jet Noise, and you kind of heard a lot about it. But I'll be honest, I think the fact that Virginia Beach and Hampton Roads being such a fleet concentration and Navy town, I think it's kind of grown on folks. They've obviously probably done a lot more fine print on real estate paperwork and showing. So I tell you, we do have a hotline that we do get calls every once in a while, but we do not get daily calls. We just, sometimes when there's an uptick in fleet operations and flying, even down in Fentress and Chesapeake, where there's a lot of flying going on in the pattern, they're low.
All hours.
All hours of the day and night. It's very manageable. We have a great community plans liaison guy that takes all those hotlines, and we put out messages all the time to the city. We tell the city manager and the mayor when we're going to have higher op-tempo operations, and I think everyone just has grown accustomed to it and understands.
Fantastic. Well, Wang, thank you for hosting us.
Thank you.
It's great to be back home.
Yeah, it is
great.
great
to be back at the O Club. So let's go grab a beer.
Yeah, absolutely. Welcome back, and I hope you guys enjoy the air show this weekend.
All right. Okay, lots more from NAS Oceana for the air show, so stay tuned.